Hey everybody, all right, let's see. This is my swag bag. I'm going to announce this at the end also, but this is introducing our new V5 SDK, so make sure you grab one of those on the way out. All right. You want to start? Yeah, awesome, cool. Well, hey everybody, my name is Mike Deignan. It's a real pleasure to be here, so thanks for having me. Believe it or not, I've actually been with Vungle for almost 7 years, so and actually in the beginning I started out on the publisher supply team, so there's a chance that some of us may have crossed paths. Pub monetization is something I've thought a lot about for a long time, so excited to be here. For the last 5 years, I've been working with Vungle's brand-specific team, really building out our brand business and adding in that extra additional mix to helping pubs monetize their content. So today we're going to be really focused on brand strategy, really around two specific things that are both very actionable. So again, how does brand fit into your monetization strategy? We're going to first start out by discussing the different types of brand buyers, really bucketing them into three. Then we're going to go into some of the key initiatives that are driving the industry forward. And then we're going to talk about some very tactical approaches to placements to increase opportunities for brand monetization. First off, actually before we get too far into it, how many folks in the audience do we have that are focused on pub monetization? Handful here? Okay, cool. That's great. So hopefully this is some pretty relevant stuff and interesting. If you're like me, if you look at the screen, some obviously popular games, but also what you'll notice is a lot of different brand banner placements. That's predominantly where I see brand advertising when I'm playing mobile games. But I don't see a whole ton of what we really focus on, full screen video. Now, obviously, as somebody who's very focused on brand advertising, this is what I'm selling to our clients. There's a lot of demand for it, but it's also pretty tricky and oftentimes difficult to execute against in terms of matching the supply with what the advertiser's needs are. So again, that's really what we want to focus on today. So when we're looking at our different brand types, we're bucketing them into three. We look at it based on the buying model that they have, the goals that they have, as well as their techniques and what's required to work with those types of clients. So the first one are actually your most common brand awareness buyers. These are your Fortune 100, Fortune 50 guys that we all see and know on TV, and of course near and dear to all the products that we buy. These guys are buying on a cost per thousand or a cost per completed view model. Obviously, they're looking to drive awareness and intent for you to make purchases for their products. And a lot of them are pretty advanced buyers, buying across lots of different types of inventory and formats. So they're pretty adept at buying programmatically. A lot of them are going to create PMPs or selling through deal IDs. This is kind of their preferred way of reaching supply. In order to activate these types of buyers, it's a heavy sales and marketing effort, a lot involved, and we're actually going to get into a little bit of the supply chain in a minute. The next bucket is somebody who's a lot more adjacent to what we see in gaming user acquisition. These are our brand apps. These guys are very focused on driving new subscribers, new users to their applications. A lot of the same techniques, a lot of the same attribution companies are exactly the same as gaming. So, in fact, we've seen over the last couple of years a huge migration of UA buyers or growth account managers go from gaming into this brand UA app. So it's pretty cool because these are guys that we all know, they understand a lot about the techniques that are available on mobile and app specifically, and a very important bucket. The last one is relatively new. These are our challenger brands, our direct-to-consumer type clients, and they're out there that were born in digital, and they're attacking the Fortune 50, Fortune 100 brands by being more stealthy, more creative in terms of how they're buying, and hyper focused on driving sales. So cost per acquisition is really the model that they prefer because they purely survive on driving incremental sales. Because they're born in digital, they're definitely strong in self-serve, programmatic channels, also search and social. In order to be successful for them, really a CPA or a ROAS model is going to be what it takes. So we'll come back to these three different buckets, but I really just wanted to set that context as we get into the presentation. Next up, so I mentioned one of the key things that's driving brand spend into our space specifically is the establishment of brand safety. We know that mobile gaming has fantastic content. It's It's brand safe inherently, it's casual, it's stuff that everybody's playing on the tube on their way to work, but brands have a little bit of a challenge warming up to it, and a few of these things that we're going to discuss are really what's allowing them to take the next step. Before we get into that, I want to walk you through what the supply chain looks like. So how does the world's leading brand advertiser, Unilever, actually buy media from a studio like Voodoo? They just pick up the phone and connect and say, hey, we'd like to run some ads with you? Probably not, although some of us would wish it would be a lot easier like that. I get a good chuckle, thanks. Yeah, not the case. More than likely, this is actually going to be what the supply chain, and of course this is like a simplified version, there's a lot more elements in here, but you're going to have the brand, they're going to be working with their agency that's going to help them develop the plan, the buying strategy. The agency more than likely is then going to be pulling the levers within a demand side platform, in this case the Trade Desk, second largest DSP in the market behind Google's DV360. The DSPs will be then plugged into the supply side platform and or the networks, such as Vungle in this case, who then is representing the inventory for the actual publisher. So this is the general supply chain that allows Unilever to run ads within Voodoo. 2019 was a big year. The IAB, which stands for the Internet Ad Bureau, developed these techniques that really created a lot of supply transparency, basically giving confidence to the buy side that there was less fraud, less bad actors, and really allowed supply to market itself that's more viable for these brands. So we're going to walk through these three initiatives and really drive home how it applies to us as we monetize traffic. So the first one is this app-ads.txt. Anybody in the audience familiar with this? Cool, a few hands going up, but relatively new content. So what this is actually a very straightforward text file that a publisher will list on their domain. So for example, voodoo.com/app-ads.txt, and on that text page we'll have all the different sellers of their inventory. The sellers of their inventory will be marked out as direct and resellers, and effectively it just basically says, I'm Voodoo, these are all the people that can sell my inventory. If they're not included on that list, they shouldn't technically be selling that inventory. So it's a way of it's a way of calling out the bad actors that are posing as sellers of traffic. The second piece of this is the sellers.json. This effectively is a mirror of the ads.txt. It's the networks in this case. So vungle.com/sellers.json. We're actually listing out all of the publishers that comprised of our network. So as you can see here, I did a kind of two-way match in a little trust badge. As the DSPs get bid requests from companies like Vungle, they actually go from the App Store, they'll click onto the URL where these two pages are hosted. They're actually going to do a two-way matching, and they're going to say, hey, Voodoo says that Vungle can sell their inventory. Is this in fact true? And vice versa. And that's what creates the trust there. So really kind of closing the loop. These two things are happening mostly offline. The third element to this is what really has me most excited. This is the OpenRTB supply chain object. And so what we're doing here is in the actual bid request, so back in one step up, when Vungle wants to sell our inventory or Voodoo or our app network's inventory, we're establishing a connection with our demand side platforms. And in that request, that information that gets sent to them, part of it's going to actually now follow the different hops. And so the DSP can see exactly where the inventory originated. And it's really cool because as a company that's been selling our SDK for a handful of years now, being able to tell this story has mostly been qualitative. Like Vungle has SDK direct traffic, and this is the value of it. But now with these three initiatives, buyers truly can see who in fact has the closest access to the supply and that it's coming through a transparent pipeline. So it's pretty good stuff. And necessarily, you shouldn't necessarily just take my word for it, but this is what's been put out there. This is Ad Exchangers. This is from a couple months ago, Trade Desk and Google. The takeaway here is that buyers can no longer purchase inventory that isn't ads.txt compliant. So Trade Desk and Google have gone the extra measure for their brand advertisers, and they've said, hey, look, we're going to take the hard work off your plates. If the publishers are not compliant with the ads.txt, we're actually just not going to purchase their inventory on your behalf. So basically, they created a scenario where you're either in or you're out. It's that straightforward. If you're a publisher trying to sell inventory and you're not compliant, the DSPs, the largest brand buyers in the world, will not purchase your inventory. So looking at some data here, Trade Desk actually imposed this new mandate for the in-app space on October 1st. Vungle was ready. We actually had all of our publishers lined up to ready to go with their app-ads.txt files, and we had the supply chain object in place. So as soon as they mandated it, we were there ready to sell our traffic in a way that they were ready to buy. We saw an 8x increase in open market bid responses, which correlated in a 3x increase in revenue for our publishers and ourselves. So it was one of those rare moments where you see an immediate impact of a product or engineering update. So I was super excited about it. And to me, it just really drives home the fact that these brand advertisers care deeply about getting access to the most transparent, clear supply paths. And in turn, they're willing to pay for it. All right. Let's look at the adoption. This is pretty cool. So there's a company, they're born on web. It's a supply-side platform called Programmatic. They actually released a dashboard. And this is the industry-wide adoption curve. And so as you can see, this started happening about midway through last year. We've kind of plateaued at about 30%, unfortunately. So there's a lot of work to be done. But you can see there was a couple steps, and then it just kind of petered out. And what that looks like is on Android, we're seeing 337 of the top 1,000 apps. On iOS, 272. So only about 33% of Android and 27% on iOS. What that means is if you have an Android app right now, 2/3 of those Android apps aren't even in the realm of consideration for the brand advertisers to purchase their inventory. 3/4 of iOS apps aren't. Now, on one hand, that's a huge opportunity. We got to do a lot of work to get those publishers to update their text entries. On the other hand, if you do happen to be in those yellow buckets, if you're one of the third or one of the quarter, you're actually sitting in a position where you can capitalize from this opportunity because those brands are able to spend on your inventory. Excuse me. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, there's two demarcations when publishers list this ads.txt entry. There's the direct path, and then there's a reseller path. And from that same article previously, we're seeing that the brand buyers as well as the publishers are actually cutting off those reseller paths, and everybody's focusing on as direct as possible. So this is a really interesting opportunity. When we look at that across the industry as far as market share, Google's a clear leader in both total market and also those direct listings. But 2 and 3 in the industry are Unity and Vungle. So we're super focused on being a direct seller. In fact, the resold here, I believe it's the same for Unity. I think both of those are just accidents. I think publishers listed those two companies as resellers because it's a small percentage. And frankly, Vungle doesn't have any way of buying off network. So it's not actually incorrect. But the direct column is really where you want to focus. So as a seller of your inventory, knowing that those reseller channels are effectively getting compressed, you want to make sure you're working with monetization partners that get you as close to the point of access to those brand advertisers as you can. Just super quickly, I'm just going to show you what it looks like. This is a sample file where Vungle's listing out our publisher network. And then next up, this is actually the RTB supply chain object. So you can see in the top corner, the RTB request, that's the publisher information. Then as it moves through to Vungle, who's the direct seller, and then on to the DSP. And then it's going to go back the other way. So it's pretty cool. The publisher can see that the path is going directly to the DSP, and the DSP can see exactly where that ad impression originated. So for you publisher monetization folks out there, by participating in a cleaner supply chain, we're going to remove bad actors that could potentially be posing as sellers of your inventory. And ultimately, by doing so, you're going to increase your opportunity to generate brand revenue. So that's going to recap that IAB initiative. And next up, we're going to discuss a little bit more about placements. Just out of familiarity, for the publisher teams out there, are you guys using placements in your monetization strategy? I would imagine so. Yeah, widely adopted stuff here. So we're looking at it from a brand lens, and the number one thing that I wanted to get out there is to think about it also from a global perspective. In many cases, a lot of times what we found that our teams will do is they'll create a global floor of, let's just say, $10 to make sure that they're holding value in some of the higher premium markets, such as like the US, for example, and which is a great opportunity for those higher markets. However, if you only have one global floor, you're missing out on a lot of different opportunity. So for example, we see tons of ad opportunities clearing in Russia in the $3 to $5 range. In Indonesia, typically within $1 to $3, Latin America, $1 to $2. So what we push our publisher AM teams to then push their supply partners is to go with a global tiered approach to make sure that you're maximizing your inventory. Now, it may not seem like a lot to get $1 CPM in Indonesia, for example, but if you happen to have millions of views there, the demand is absolutely there and ready to spend. So it's all about maximizing your opportunity. I would recommend connecting with your pub supply person at the networks that you work with and talk to them. Just say, hey, at these different countries, what are the tiers that I should be setting my placements at? And they'll tell you. They'll tell you where they have the most demand, and they'll also tell you what those right price points are. Effectively, we're trying to catch gold, so as many opportunities as we can to create that is the best approach. Okay, so from the beginning we talked about these 3 different brand buckets. Now we're going to use those different buckets and talk about a placement strategy to try and set yourselves up for each one. Your traditional CPM brand awareness buyer, they are most interested in reach volume. So they want to see as many eyeballs as they possibly can. These are your storytellers. They want you to understand what they're trying to sell you, the story that they're pitching, and so in return they also really value high completion rates. So that's why rewarded placements are pretty critical for this type of client. But you may not expect this, but brand advertisers, because they've been trained on online video and mobile web, they actually don't spend at the price point that you would think they would. They're actually a little bit lower in terms of their CPM thresholds, which is really challenging, especially within mobile gaming, because gaming ads in gaming publishers drive such a high yield or a high eCPM. It's very difficult for brand clients to compete there. So what we recommend is find places lower down in the waterfall that still have big reach that we can set a lower price point to. We all know that a lot of the install activity is happening up in higher price and higher placements, which is great. So finding those niche opportunities a little bit lower and a little bit cheaper is for these types of brand clients. Next up is our brand user acquisition guys. As I mentioned earlier, they're very similar to your gaming clients. So unlike the previous slide, these guys actually do want to be higher up in the waterfall. We got to find those right opportunities to drive a conversion. In return, you are going to see a mid to a higher price point. So because they're getting higher into the waterfall, they know they have to be competitive in there. So again, also rewarded placements are a pretty high opportunity for this type of buyer. Lastly, when we're looking at the D2C guys, it's kind of a little bit of a mix between the two previous. The biggest thing for them is going to be frequency. I don't know about you guys, but I don't buy a mattress every day, and I usually take a while to buy one. So if I'm thinking about Casper, they have to reach consumers quite often at a pretty high clip. So by doing so, they want to do it across all kinds of different formats. So if your publisher app has banner, interstitial, and video opportunities, this is a guy that's going to want to work its way through those different placements. Because they're driving for a cost per acquisition or a purchase, they know that they need to be higher up in the waterfall, so you're going to command a little bit higher premium price there. But performance is king, so driving those conversions wherever you can find it is really what's going to be most important for this client. So we talked about two things today. The IAB initiatives that are driving advertiser interest and brand spend into our market, as well as some tactical opportunities around placements. So the first key takeaway is to update your app-ads.txt entry. Again, you saw the data, only about 30% of our top 1,000 publisher apps are compliant. It means there's a huge opportunity for anybody who's not to get in. And then with placements, work with your pub supply teams to carve out those opportunities. Brand advertisers are trying to spend within mobile and mobile gaming specifically, and it's just very difficult. So if you can find those placements to create opportunity, you'll be in a good position. So what we're saying today is if you want to connect with us and consult with our supply team and our brand team, we'd love to. We'd love to take this opportunity. So there's my email address. Feel free to reach out and set up a consultation. We'd be more than happy to. It'd be really fun. This is stuff that we do with our pub supply team all the time. And the other thing is, I had 3 things to remember. That was one of them. The second is we have this piece of paper introducing our newest SDK. And the third, I got this, is we're actually going to be presenting at White Nights on Thursday. So if anybody's going from here to Amsterdam, look us up. We'd love to connect with you there as well. And lastly, does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Hold on, I'll get a mic over to you.
Oh yeah, I got swag. It's gonna be good.
Hi, just wanted to ask, in terms of, obviously as like a publisher, CPMs are kind of key for me.
Yeah.
But if I'm using a platform like Vungle to get higher CPM, surely that's dictated by the DSP and not you, or have I misunderstood something here?
Yes and no, actually. That's a good question. So to kind of walk that through, so you're obviously concerned about effective CPM. And the question was, is the brand buyer CPM dictated by the DSP who's doing the actual buying, or a company like Vungle? And the question is a little bit twofold. In some regard, absolutely. So we break it down as open market and private. In an open market environment, the best thing that we can do is position your inventory, making sure that we're passing all the necessary attributes to allow that DSP to value that ad opportunity. But you're right. At that point, they're determining the price point that they're bidding against. In the private marketplace, it's actually slightly different, and we're actually selling through specific private marketplaces or tranches of inventory at a set CPM. So in that regard, we actually are setting more of the price that's going to be competitive for you as a publisher trying to monetize. And just to put that in perspective, we're about 60-40 in terms of Vungle's revenue. On the PMP side of business, 40% on open market. So we're actually driving most of the value in that regard. Yeah. Now, would you like a pair of socks or a thing of mints? Socks. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Hey, there's mints or socks on the line here. Come on.
Yeah. We got swag, guys.
All right. I know if you'll think of something probably in about an hour and a half from now. It always works that way. Do you guys have a booth out here?
No booth, but reach out anytime, and we'd love to connect. So thank you all.
Oh, and hey, Michael, thank you for sponsoring the event. We really appreciate that.
You're welcome.